Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Films. My name is Alan. We recently did a video looking at what movies predicted about 2020, and they mostly got things terribly wrong. We're talking about flying dragons, aliens on Mars, kaijus invading from another planet. But the one movie I really wanted to talk about in that video was Minority Report. But because Minority Report is actually set in 2048, we couldn't really do it in a video about 2020. So instead, we've decided to devote an entire video to see what they got right and what they didn't. Aside from being one of the best directors to ever make a movie, Steven Spielberg is also quite the futurist. Either that or he really does his research well. Minority Report, which was released in 2002, got a lot of things right about what's going on today. And we still have 28 years to go until 2048. Now, the premise of the movie is probably the only fantastical thing about the film. In 2048 in Washington, D.C., a new branch of Metro PD is created called the Pre-Crime Division. The Pre-Crime Division used three individuals known as precogs who could visualize crimes before they actually happened. The three precogs all had a neurological condition known as Renning syndrome, which is a result of maternal addictions. Which is not when someone is addicted to moms, but when moms are addicted to space crack and have babies. Renning syndrome gives these poor kids the sight, and they are then submerged into a pool and kept doped up for an entire decade and made to constantly witness murders.
It's better if you don't think of them as human.
It's all really messed up. And so is arresting someone for a crime they haven't committed yet. But other than that major plot device and a few vehicles and tools, well, they basically get a lot of things right. Now, how can we take a dream or a vision from a precog and translate that into something usable for Tom Cruise to see? Well, we would need to take the signal in a person's brain and translate it into something that a computer could read. In our own world, we are experimenting with new ways of creating brain-to-computer interfaces, but they're mainly used so that individuals can control other devices with their brain, not necessarily read what's on our minds. This is quite important for an individual who is paralyzed or has lost a limb. There are a lot of devices that can take electrical signals from the skin and use those signals to power a mechanical limb. In the future, the hope is to take that same signal further up the nervous system near the brainstem, which could mean a clearer, stronger signal and much less latency. Creating a machine that can read an individual's dreams or drug-fueled nightmares, whatever you want to call it, is a lot less practical. But in 2013, a neuroscientist at Brown University named Masako Tamaki used the fMRI machine to look at the brain activity of three individuals while they were dreaming. The subjects were not precogs, just normal people. These three individuals would then wake up from their dreams and report what they just dreamed about. Once enough information was collected, a computer model was able to correlate certain brain activities with certain objects in a dream. Now, Tom Cruise gets actual HD footage from the precog's brain, which we aren't that close to developing yet. But if there is a need to do this because, let's say, we discovered some precogs in our population, I'm sure the developmental cycle wouldn't take that long. We could probably figure it out before 2048, as long as there's enough financial and political drive to complete this mission. For any of you guys who like to do crazy things like animate 3D objects, video editing, or interacting with your virtual waifu through a computer screen, you know that a keyboard and mouse is really limited. It's better than a controller, obviously, don't be basic. But we need something better. For Tom Cruise, sorting through the murder images hidden within the precog's dream is pretty easy thanks to his computer's very seamless interface. It uses control gloves that are very similar to VR control gloves that you can get right now on the internet. Motion capping technology used to be something that only large movie studios or video game studios could afford, but today if you have an iPhone, you can basically just do it like that. All these future interfaces still need to fix a few things to make them easier to use, and for now the keyboard and touchpad are really practical. But more and more specialized tasks will soon be taking advantages of things like motion cap technology or AR controls. Instead of using a VR or AR headset though, Tom Cruise mainly uses a large piece of smart glass to display everything he needs to look at. One sector where smart glass usage will probably grow exponentially is in the automobile industry. Right now, manufacturers are testing smart glass windows that can tint automatically. If you've ever been on a Boeing 787 Dreamliner, you've probably seen something that's similar to what I'm talking about. But of course, the applications for this technology go far beyond just tinting your windows. What manufacturers ultimately want to do is to have a heads-up display for drivers that include all of the gauges and meters that would normally be in your dashboard. Imagine if you didn't have to look at your phone or a screen for GPS information. Instead, it's displayed right in front of you on the street so you can never really miss a turn. GM is also experimenting with smart glass programs designed to entertain the passengers. There are also third-party manufacturers that are pushing the technology out there for consumers to use, but it still isn't high quality enough to recommend. They're also making heads-up displays for motorcycle helmets, which definitely will make riding a lot easier. I have a friend that I ride with a lot. He only has one eye. I mean, he's a complete badass, but he's definitely looking into this technology to make his riding safer, because if you've ever ridden a motorcycle, taking your eyes off the road, even to look at your dash for a second, can get you into an accident. Now, the motorcycle helmets we're talking about are actually augmented reality. This is a technology that displays information in the air around you, and it's usually done through some kind of wearable lens. AR has had some setbacks when the very hyped up Google glasses failed, but let's be honest, Google cannot make hardware. They're not even that good at software. If you've seen our end of the YouTube app, it's completely ridiculous and terrible. They need to hire some Asian programmers. But Microsoft's much less cool but far more functional HoloLens is pretty much ready to present an entire new way for us to interact with computers. When the pre-crime cops get onto location, they usually scan the perp's eyes after they subdue them just to make sure they get the right person. This technology has actually been around for quite some time. In the 1930s, eye doctors basically figured out that the blood vessels in the back of our eyes are unique to the individual. And in the 1980s, patents were made for the first consumer eye retinal scanners. While retina scanners are incredibly accurate compared to other methods of identification, like with most technology, there needs to be a financial, practical, or political reason to implement it across all of society. Collecting a database of retinas is kind of a pain and would cost a considerable amount of money. And most countries have already been collecting a massive database of fingerprints and other biometrics. For any of you guys who have recently become American citizens, congratulations. Don't forget to use your free firearm voucher to purchase your first American weapon. I think they expire in a year, so make sure you take advantage of that. It's a very American thing to do. But you'll also probably remember the process in which they took your fingerprints, a picture, and some other identifying features. The fingerprinting was pretty easy to do. Retina scanning is actually a lot more invasive. It requires a light to be shown through your eyes. It's similar to that test you get from the eye doctor for glaucoma, and it actually takes a considerably longer time than just a fingerprint scanner. I mean, now we have fingerprint scanners in our iPhones, and a lot of the other technologies that we talked about are actually also in these phones. Camera technology is also getting considerably better now, so there's facial recognition software along with iris recognition software and many other different ways to identify a person that is very easy to use. So while there are some great technologies out there, again, we have to remember that ease of use and costs are pretty important when it comes to implementing a technology for the rest of society. Oh, and then there's the whole going to a black market doctor and getting your eyes switched out. That isn't really possible just yet. I'm sure you could find a black market doctor who's willing to try to do an eye transplant, but basically the only eye transplant surgery available right now is just replacing your cornea. You can't do the whole eye. Tom Cruise likes to wind down the day with homemade videos of his ex-wife and ex-kid. The kid disappeared. But instead of being displayed on a screen, they kind of just float in the air in 2D. It's a hologram, but it's a strange kind of hologram because you'd imagine if you had this technology, you would go for a 3D scan instead of a 2D one. The hard part of building a hologram is actually projecting light into the thin air and just having it stay there. Scanning things in 3D, on the other hand, is not that difficult. Now, in our own world, we haven't really figured out the hologram thing just yet. I mean, it was rumored that Tupac appeared in hologram form at Coachella, but that was actually Tupac. He was just coming back to visit us from whatever star system he came from. Apparently, when he was cast as Mace Windu by George Lucas, he got a bit paranoid that Biggie Smalls was trying to out him and his real identity as a Jedi Knight. But that technology for holograms does exist. It uses an illusion to make things look 3D, but it's not a real hologram. It basically uses an overhead projector, which shoots down light onto a tilted piece of glass on the floor. Now, there have been some advances in using lasers to create actual 3D forms, but the problem is a lot of those lasers are pretty high powered and they will burn your skin. Although Japanese researchers are using the much safer femtosecond laser to create actual free-floating holograms that can react to your touch, A private company in Australia has also developed a functional laser hologram machine to create 3D images, very similar to the ones we see in Star Wars, actually. The problem is it costs $10,000. The future is going to be really interesting. One of the coolest parts of Minority Report's future world is the inclusion of automated cars. Every major car manufacturer, tech company, and Dyson is getting into the race. You know, Dyson, the guys who have tried to Appleize their storefronts and are selling a freaking $400 vacuum cleaner. You know, the Fed released a survey this year that only 40% of adults in America have $400 in their bank to cover a medical emergency. You see this thing? $60, and it works great. Not really, it literally just broke, but the point is I'll have $340 left to buy a gun in case my neighbor has a medical emergency and turns into a zombie because of the coronavirus. Anyway, back to automated cars. Right now, the technology relies on an assortment of sensors, radar, lasers, and even cameras to map out its surroundings. We've pretty much figured out how to make a car sense things, but sorting through all that information and knowing how to actually move the car around is still a bit tricky for the computer. There are 6 levels of autonomous driving, and right now we've obtained level 1, which is driver assistance, and level 2, which is partial automation. Some more advanced vehicles like the ones Tesla makes are considered level 3, but level 4 and beyond is still out of reach. Level 4 and beyond is basically fully automatic cars, but right now the algorithms that we have and the machine learning that we have isn't complicated enough to really figure out every different factor on the road. But instead of trying to figure out a true general AI like we see in other movies, Minority Report focuses more on the infrastructure rather than the AI in the car. Which is a good thing because we're not even close to figuring out artificial general intelligence, and Spielberg wisely assumes that we won't have it figured out by the late 2040s either. Instead of trying to make the cars smarter, what they do in Minority Report is make the roads smarter. By doing that, we can make a much more controlled and predictable environment for the cars to drive on. If we take out pedestrians, random unmarked driveways, busy intersections, non-motorized vehicles, self-driven cars, we can actually have automated cars become a reality. Which is why the first wide use of automated vehicles in our world will most likely be limited to the highway networks, where you have a similar closed-off area with very few factors to worry about. So the Minority Report solution to automated driving is actually quite realistic, except for maybe the vertical Hot Wheel tracks that go up buildings. In the last decade, Facebook and Google have made a killing, but it's kind of hard to understand exactly how they've done it. We've already mentioned that Google is terrible at making and selling hardware, and Facebook doesn't really make anything aside from genocide, sectarian violence, and depression. So where does their worth come from? Well, highly effective and highly personalized advertising. Steve? In the TV days, if you wanted to run a commercial, you chose a show that you believed your customers watched. Which is why TV is now full of advertisements for walking canes, CPAP machines, ambulance chasing lawyers, and pizza. A lot of pizza. Did you know they use glue in the cheese to get these shots? Looks great, but not actually food. But you would still eat it, right? Now with the internet, that advertising has gotten a lot more accurate. Facebook and Google will actually look at your interests and demographics and specifically give you ads that are built just for you. Are you searching for a motorcycle helmet for next spring? Well, Google search will make sure to show you some ads for helmets while you're watching YouTube. Facebook will see that you liked a page run by people who like hunting people for fun. So when you go on Instagram, maybe they'll send you to Mark Zuckerberg's page. That, or you might get an ad for a cool survival knife, trash bags, shovels, and a bear trap. This is actually how we make money here on YouTube as well. You see, any screen, whether it's on a smartphone or a computer screen, is a two-way dimensional portal. So if you guys can see and hear us, we can see and hear you. Actually, in the corner of the room right here is Ben, and he's basically sitting down and jotting down notes so you can figure out what you, Steve, are doing in your room so that we can sell that information to the highest bidder on Google AdWords. What's really cool about Minority Report is when Tom Cruise walks into the Gap store, he's actually greeted as Mr. Yakamoto because he stole Mr. Yakamoto's eyes, and the store uses retinal scanning. What's more interesting is that the store then asks him if he's interested in certain types of clothing that Mr. Yakamoto liked. This is actually a technology that we're already seeing in stores right now. If you go to the Nike store in New York City and have their app, it'll automatically know what shoe size you wear and what you've bought in the past. Because shopping is such a difficult thing to do, especially without an app. If you guys thought millennials were bad, wait until Generation Z leaves their parents' house. I'm not really sure we'll see a display screen in Nike stores just yet that will yell out a greeting and tell everyone what you purchased last time. People do still like their privacy. But I'm sure even that's going to change in a few generations. Now, enough of this doom and gloom though, guys. I know we really like sensationalizing news because it's fun to scare people, but the reality is most future technology is going to help us out a lot, and it's going to make life a lot easier. So that is our analysis of Minority Report's analysis of the future, and I gotta say they got a lot of things right. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that life is a movie and you are the protagonist.